In the final desperate year of the war, Germany stood on the brink of collapse. The Allies were advancing from the west, and the Red Army was devouring what remained of the Eastern Front. Amid the chaos, the Reich's greatest minds were summoned for one last miracle, a weapon that could defy inevitability itself. Deep within a secret facility carved into the frozen Bavarian Alps, engineers, scientists, and test pilots labored under the codename Project Nachtlied Night Song. From that crucible of desperation, a machine emerged that would blur the line between myth and machinery. They called it Eisen Donner, Iron Thunder. Unlike any aircraft conceived before it, Iron Thunder was an enigma even to those who built it. Its very existence was an act of defiance against physics, logistics, and time. Every bolt, every rivet carried the weight of a dying empire's final hope, constructed from a fusion of advanced alloys, scavenged from experimental jet programs, and even captured Allied materials. Its sleek frame shimmered with a dull, almost otherworldly hue. Some said it absorbed light instead of reflecting it. To radar, it was almost invisible. Decades before stealth became part of aviation vocabulary, the engineers behind Iron Thunder were not typical Luftwaffe personnel. Many were scientists previously dismissed for their unconventional theories, aerodynamicists who believed airflow could be manipulated through vibration frequencies, metallurgists who experimented with living alloys, and propulsion experts who toyed with jet piston hybrids. Together, they forged an aircraft unlike any other, a hybrid monster powered by twin pulse jets mounted beside a supercharged piston engine. When ignited, the engine screamed like thunder tearing open the heavens, earning the craft its haunting name. The wings were swept back at a daring 40-degree angle, designed to slice through high-altitude air currents with minimal resistance. It was a configuration unseen at the time, a shape that would later define post-war jet fighters. Its control systems, however, were its greatest mystery. Surviving notes describe a form of adaptive feedback that allowed the plane to correct minor instabilities automatically, as though it could sense the air around it. Some historians would later speculate that Iron Thunder represented an early, primitive attempt at flight automation decades ahead of its era. The Luftwaffe's commander saw in Iron Thunder their last chance to rewrite the war's fate. Fuel shortages crippled the German Air Force, and their once unstoppable fleet of Messerschmitts have been reduced to smoking wrecks. But Iron Thunder was designed to run on a unique blend of synthetic fuel and liquid oxygen, a volatile mixture that, if misused, could turn the plane into a flying bomb. For that reason, only one pilot was deemed capable of handling it: Captain Lucas Adler. Adler was no ordinary soldier. Once celebrated as the Falcon of the East, he had survived more than 50 confirmed dogfights against Soviet and British aces. His skill was unmatched, his resolve unshaken, yet behind his stoic demeanor lay a man haunted by ghosts, the comrades he had lost, the civilians he had seen perish, the war that no longer seemed worth winning. He did not fly for the Reich anymore. He flew for redemption. When he first saw Iron Thunder and its hangar wings gleaming beneath dim industrial lights, frost curling from its steel skin, he simply whispered, "The sound of fate." The Project-S goal was terrifyingly simple: to deliver one decisive strike to the heart of London, an attack so powerful and precise that it would shatter Allied morale and force diplomatic surrender before Berlin fell. The aircraft was designed to carry a single experimental bomb weapon theorized to unleash energy. Unlike any conventional explosive, some claimed it involved early nuclear research. Others insisted it was a prototype electromagnetic pulse device, a light weapon meant to extinguish an entire city's power grid. Every test leading up to the final flight was cloaked in secrecy. Only a handful of photographs were ever taken, all of which vanished in the aftermath of the war. What remains today are fragments of sketches and design notes recovered from a half-burned journal found in a demolished bunker in mid. The diagrams seem almost alien, showing control panels without physical levers, cables interlaced with crystalline circuits, and a central guidance system labeled Der Geist, the spirit. Historians still debate whether Iron Thunder ever truly flew. Official records end abruptly on March 3, 1945, with one final line written in an engineer's shaking hand: "The storm is ready to fly." That day, the sound of engines echoed across the mountain valley, then silence. No wreckage was ever found. No pilot ever returned. Yet witnesses in the nearby villages swore they saw something that night, a flash of light splitting the clouds and a streak of silver vanishing toward the west. Some said it was the birth of a miracle. Others called it the scream of a dying empire. March 5th, 1945, the morning when physics, faith, and fear all collided in one impossible flight. The Bavarian sky was heavy with fog, the kind that swallowed mountains whole. Inside the hidden airstrip at mid, dozens of engineers stood in frozen silence as Eisen Donner, Iron Thunder, rolled to the end of the runway. It was supposed to remain grounded. The prototype had never completed a full test flight. Its engines had only been run for minutes at a time. The systems were unstable, the guidance control untested, and the hybrid fuel mix volatile enough to turn the entire hangar into a firestorm. Command had ordered a delay, but Captain Lukas Adler, standing beside the machine that had consumed years of desperate innovation, made his choice. "Every storm begins with one thunderclap," he said, pulling on his leather gloves. His voice carried through the static of the radio room, steady and calm, as if he were already part of history. When the engines ignited, the mountains trembled. Witnesses described the sound as something between a scream and a heartbeat, a mechanical pulse that vibrated through the bones. Snow cascaded from the cliffs as the Iron Thunder began to move, its wings cutting the fog like a blade through smoke. Then, with a sudden burst of blue-white fire, the craft lifted into the air, ascending faster than anything built by human hands. For a moment, the entire valley lit up with an electric glow. And then silence. Berlin's Central Command received a short, fractured message. "Iron Thunder is sending. The sky's ours again." Those were the last words ever heard from Captain Adler. At 7:42 hours, British radar stations along the French coast detected a blip moving northward over the channel. It was small, fast, and erratic, climbing to 40,000 feet, then vanishing, only to reappear seconds later in an impossible arc. The speed estimates were inconsistent. Some readings showed 800 kilometers per hour. RAF squadrons scrambled. Spitfires and Tempests rose to intercept. But they couldn't even approach its altitude. One pilot reported a streak of silver piercing the cloud cover, trailing sparks like a meteor burning in reverse. Then, as it crossed the southern English coast, all instruments began to fail. Radio static drowned the airwaves. Compasses spun. Fuel gauges dropped to zero, only to reset moments later. At precisely 8:06, every radio frequency between London and Dover went silent for 2 full minutes. Power stations flickered. Telegraph lines died. Even the newly installed radar system at Biggin Hill shorted out. When contact returned, the skies were clear. No plane, no contrail, no explosion. Only an electrical storm lingered over the coastline, flashing without thunder. Meteorologists were baffled. The storm wasn't on any forecast or atmospheric record. It had simply appeared, pulsed for 5 minutes, and vanished. Local witnesses later described hearing a low metallic hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "It was like the air was breathing," said one fisherman near. Another man claimed the sea itself rippled in concentric waves, as if responding to a vibration from the sky. The British press initially dismissed the event as Moz hysteria, but within days, similar reports emerged from across northern France, glowing contrails at night, sudden, static interference, the faint echo of engines where there should have been silence. The phenomenon was so persistent that Allied intelligence issued a confidential memorandum titled "Phantom Aircraft Over the Channel." The official explanation: atmospheric distortion caused by high-altitude bombing raids. Unofficially, no one could explain what they had seen. Meanwhile, back in Germany, the Iron Thunder project was immediately classified Verschlusssache, top secret. The engineers who had built it were interrogated by the Some claimed Adler had deviated from his mission, redirecting the craft mid-flight. Others insisted he was following orders. The last entry in the command logbook read simply, "Target unknown, outcome uncontrollable." Days later, strange fear began spreading even among the Nazi leadership. Reports from radar operators and coastal observers suggested the Iron Thunder was still flying, circling the skies long after it should have crashed or run out of fuel. It appeared as a faint shimmer on instruments, a ghost echo that moved independently of any known aircraft. To the superstitious, it was a cursed creation, the spirit of a dying war refusing to rest. To the scientists, It was an unexplainable phenomenon, but to those who had built it, Iron Thunder was no longer a machine. It had become something else. A storm that would not die. Captain Lucas Adler was officially listed as missing in action. His body was never recovered. His flight log, stored in a sealed briefcase, ended with one final note, written before takeoff. If the storm answers, then the war will listen. No one ever saw him again. But for months after the war's end, Allied radar operators swore they sometimes caught a flicker high above the channel, a signal too fast to be a bird, too steady to be lightning, a blip that would appear for a heartbeat, then fade into silence. And with it, the breath of thunder itself. When the war finally ended in 1945, the world believed that every secret of the Third Reich had been uncovered, every laboratory burned, every prototype dismantled, every mad idea silenced beneath the ruble of Berlin. But deep within the Bavarian Alps, Allied intelligence stumbled upon something different. Beneath the wreckage of a collapsed hangar near Mittenwald, they found remnants of machinery that defied conventional design, twisted turbine blades. A shattered cockpit canopy forged from alloy no one could identify, and fragments of blue-tinted metal that gave off residual static long after power had been cut. The discovery was logged under a false inventory code, recovered material, unverified origin. It would later be renamed Project Iron Thunder Suppressed File 12. The Americans moved swiftly. Under the covert operation, later known as Paperclip, they extracted surviving engineers from the ruins, men whose faces were pale from exhaustion, whose hands still trembled from handling the impossible. These were not idiots. They were scientists obsessed with the pursuit of flight beyond reason. They spoke of a project codenamed Nachtlied, or Night Song, whose purpose had gone far beyond warfare. According to their testimonies, Iron Thunder was built upon calculations derived from what they called impossible equations. Formulas that attempted to merge propulsion physics with atmospheric resonance. What the Americans heard disturbed even the most hardened intelligence officers. The lead engineer, Dr. Wilhelm Kruse, claimed that Iron Thunder's propulsion system didn't just generate thrust. It manipulated the surrounding air density using oscillating electromagnetic fields. "We made the air sing," Kruse allegedly said, "and when the air sang back, we knew we had touched something greater than flight. Every surviving blueprint, gear, and bolt was packed into sealed crates and shipped to the United States. They were labeled experimental jet data, unverified, hidden among thousands of other wartime documents. Officially, the project never existed. The British Air Ministry issued a statement calling it a misinterpreted combination of wreckage and rumor. But inside classified circles, a different story circulated. Analysts at Wright Field reported that certain fragments from the Iron Thunder were resistant to conventional scanning methods, as if holding a residual magnetic field like the echo of energy trapped inside the metal itself. Then, in 1947, something strange happened. Radar stations along the North Atlantic detected a fast-moving object traveling westward from Europe toward Greenland. It was flying higher than any jet in existence, higher than even captured. V-2 rocket tests had achieved, and its radar signature matched the same configuration described in the Bavarian files. Swept wings, elongated fuselage, twin exhausts glowing faintly blue. For 43 seconds, the object remained visible before vanishing without a trace. The official report listed it as an unidentified meteorological anomaly, but the technicians who saw it swore it maneuvered like a pilot-controlled craft. Rumors spread among Air Force personnel. Some whispered that the Americans had secretly rebuilt Iron Thunder and were testing it under the desert skies of New Mexico. Others insisted the machine had never been recovered at all, like Captain Lucas Adler's original aircraft was still airborne somewhere above the jet stream, endlessly circling the Earth like a metallic ghost. By 1952, the story grew darker. Dr. Wilhelm Kruse, the last surviving engineer directly tied to Nachtlied, gave an anonymous interview to an American journalist from the Boston Globe. He spoke quietly, his eyes haunted, saying only one line that made it into print before his sudden disappearance weeks later. "We built something that could hear the Earth's heartbeat, and it flew into it." Hours after his statement was published, government agents confiscated all related materials. The article was removed from public archives. 2 months later, Kruse was found dead in a hotel room in Dayton, Ohio, a heart attack. They said no autopsy was performed. Behind closed doors, the United States and the United Kingdom formally agreed to suppress any mention of Iron Thunder. Operation Paperclip records referencing the project were redacted when congressional committees requested documentation on advanced German aeronautics. The files, labeled Project Nachtlied, were already missing. By 1955, the aircraft's existence had been scrubbed entirely from the Luftwaffe's captured archives. And yet, it refused to vanish. In radar logs, spanning from 1953 to 1962. Air Defense Command analysts recorded dozens of anomalies over the North Atlantic. Each shared the same characteristics: extreme altitude, rapid acceleration, and a reflective signature consistent with a large aircraft constructed of unknown alloy. The blip appeared, vanished, and reappeared in near-identical coordinates over the course of years. Always at night, always during electrical storms. To most officials, these echoes were nothing more than misread data, electronic ghosts born of interference. But among pilots, especially those flying long-range patrols over the ocean, the legend of Iron Thunder lived on. They called it the ghost plane, the soundless one, or simply Adler's shadow. Some swore that when lightning struck the clouds, they could see the outline of a silver aircraft gliding just beyond the storm front. Its engines silent, its wings leaving faint blue trails. Officially, the world moved on. Unofficially, Iron Thunder never stopped flying. By the late 1940s, the world had begun to rebuild itself, brick by brick, from the ashes of global war. Nations shifted their gaze from destruction to innovation, and yet, buried deep beneath the progress, the echo of Iron Thunder refused to fade. It whispered through laboratories, test ranges, and government boardrooms, an invisible hand guiding the next era of flight. Engineers on both sides of the Iron Curtain began to design aircraft that looked suspiciously similar to the German prototype that had supposedly vanished in 19... Resemblance was undeniable. The Americans experimented with swept-wing jet bombers, stealth coatings, and heat-resistant alloys that had never existed before the war. In the Soviet Union, aeronautical engineers suddenly accelerated their research into high-altitude reconnaissance planes with hybrid propulsion. Unofficially, many of these breakthroughs drew inspiration from captured concepts whose origins were never disclosed. Some historians later claimed that both the SR-71 Blackbird and the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber bore the unmistakable design DNA of the Iron Thunder, the same elongated fuselage, the same curved engine housings, and even faintly similar thermal suppression systems decades before their public debut. But what unsettled scientists and military officials most weren't the similarities, it was the phenomena that followed them. Between 1958 and 1975, multiple test pilots from the United States, the Soviet Union, and even the newly formed European aviation programs began reporting strange aerial encounters during high-altitude experiments. The most famous occurred in 1967 during a classified American flight test over Nevada. A pilot whose identity remains redacted, describes seeing a metallic craft surrounded by static discharges of lightning moving silently alongside his jet at more than 60,000 feet. It kept pace for nearly 40 seconds before vanishing upward, not fading into distance, but disappearing entirely, as though it had folded into the air itself. When the report reached the Pentagon, it was buried. The pilot was told to forget the anomaly. But 10 years later, a declassified Soviet file surfaced describing an almost identical event near Murmansk. Silver aircraft gliding above a thunderstorm, surrounded by electric arcs, and leaving behind no sonic boom, no vapor trail, no thermal signature. Soviet radar recorded nothing. Witnesses said it sounded like distant thunder fading into silence. The coincidence was too precise to dismiss. The myth grew stronger with each retelling. To some, Iron Thunder had never crashed at all. It had transcended. Scientists debated quietly whether the aircraft's hybrid propulsion might have created an electromagnetic resonance capable of lifting it beyond conventional flight parameters. Perhaps Captain Lucas Adler had reached a layer of the atmosphere so thin, so charged, that it interacted with the planet's magnetic field in ways no one could yet comprehend. A few radical physicists suggested it had reached orbital resonance, locked between gravity and the ionosphere, circling the Earth unseen, forever flying, powered not by fuel, but by momentum and the strange oscillations of space itself. Others viewed the idea through a more mystical lens, among pilots and radar operators. Iron Thunder became known as the Phantom Machine, a ghost of metal and willpower, the manifestation of human ambition that refused to die. They said the aircraft had become a vessel of its pilot's determination, that Adler's final moment of defiance had fused man and machine into something eternal. He broke through heaven, one old aviator whispered decades later, and heaven never let him go. In the 1980s, classified. American aerospace documents from Project Aurora hinted at test data involving propulsion modes that eerily matched Iron Thunder's theoretical specifications. Mixed compression engines capable of manipulating atmospheric ions. No official connection was ever admitted, but among those who studied black budget research, the resemblance was chilling. Even modern stealth aircraft, they said, carried the fingerprint of Adler's storm. And then came the storms. Every few years, pilots flying transatlantic routes reported electrical anomalies during Thunderhead's compasses spinning, altimeters freezing, static voices whispering in white noise. Some described flashes of light in the shape of wings far above the storm tops. When questioned, meteorologists could find no natural explanation. Radar data often showed brief distortions, blips that appeared, split into two, and vanished. The shape was always the same: long fuselage, swept wings, blue glow. Historians called it folklore. Scientists called it coincidence. But to those who believed, Iron Thunder had become something beyond engineering or war, a ghost of technology, a reminder that every invention born from desperation carries within it a fragment of human spirit. They said its roar was no longer thunder in the clouds, but a kind of echo, the sound of man's relentless hunger to transcend his limits. Decades passed, but whenever storms rolled over Europe or the Atlantic, old pilots would listen carefully. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the lightning, they swore they could still hear it, that deep, rolling hum, the rhythm of metal against sky, a whisper that seemed to say, "We are still flying." The legend of Iron Thunder didn't die. It evolved from machine to myth, from history to haunting. More than 80 years have passed since Captain Lucas Adler and the Iron Thunder vanished into the storm, yet the legend refuses to rest. Historians call it an anomaly. Engineers dismiss it as a myth. But for those who have heard the faint hum of something metallic beyond the clouds, it remains a mystery that won't die. A story that exists somewhere between fact, fear, and faith in human ambition. No official records survived the war. The Luftwaffe's archives were bombed to ash. The Allied reports were sealed or lost. No serial number, no production documents, no photographs. What endures are whispers, testimonies from soldiers, radar operators, and villagers who swore they saw a silver flash tear through the sky in the final weeks of 1945. To them, Iron Thunder wasn't a machine. It was an omen, something that came from the earth and returned to the heavens, roaring like the wrath of the gods. Over the decades, strange traces kept surfacing. In 1959, a British weather balloon recorded unexplained electromagnetic interference over the North Sea, the same region Adler was last tracked. In 1978, a Soviet radar array detected a high-speed object entering the upper stratosphere, too fast for any known aircraft, yet moving with a deliberate, controlled pattern. Both incidents were buried in technical reports that quietly disappeared into government vaults. Then came the 2003 satellite anomaly. A European Space Agency satellite scanning the North CES magnetic field captured a brief but intense metallic reflection at 52,000 meters altitude, traveling at nearly Mach 6 before vanishing. Analysts labeled it sensor miscalibration, but a small group of aviation historians noticed the coordinates matched the final recorded flight path of Iron Thunder. A coincidence, perhaps, or the reappearance of something the world had long forgotten. Aviation physicists debated in hushed tones, could a 1940s aircraft, no matter how advanced, survive for decades in the upper atmosphere? The answer should have been no, yet the more they studied the myth, the more questions arose. The Iron Thunder's rumored propulsion system, a fusion of piston, jet, and electromagnetic thrust, could, in theory, generate sustained lift if caught between the charged layers of the ionosphere. In such a pocket, time and air pressure behaved differently. A craft could circle endlessly, trapped in perpetual motion. its systems long dead but its shell preserved by the cold vacuum above. That idea transformed Iron Thunder from legend into something almost cosmic, not a ghost of war, but a relic of human overreach. A machine that crossed the boundary between technology and nature, built from desperation yet becoming a mirror for everything the war represented. Ambition, arrogance, and the longing to conquer the impossible. For many historians, the myth of Iron Thunder serves as a parable. It reminds us that innovation and obsession often share the same heartbeat. In the race to win, the Luftwaffe engineers built something they barely understood. A craft so far ahead of its time that, even today, some of its theoretical principles remain unexplained. The war ended, but the storm they unleashed never truly stopped. Pilots still tell stories. Commercial captains crossing the Atlantic report flickers on their radar at high altitudes, blips that move too fast, then vanish. Some claim to see flashes of silver in the distance when lightning splits the sky. A few, usually old enough to have heard the rumors as children, whisper a name they were never supposed to know: Iron Thunder. The legend has grown beyond machines and metal. In the eyes of many, it has become a symbol of humanity's endless flight, the pursuit of progress without understanding, the hunger to touch what lies beyond the horizon. The Iron Thunder, they say, is not just the ghost of a lost aircraft. It is the spirit of invention itself, forever circling the world, reminding us that even the greatest creations come with consequences. If Adler truly flew into the unknown that day, perhaps he became part of the storm. Perhaps his aircraft merged with the forces that try to command lightning, wind, magnetism, and became something that cannot be measured or replicated. Every thunderclap, every flash in the night sky might still carry the echo of his final ascent. Built in secret, flown once, remembered forever, and maybe somewhere beyond the clouds, above the reach of radar and reason, still flying. A silent reminder that the boundary between man's ambition and the universe, as mystery, is thinner than we dare to believe. Even now, when storms roll across the North Sea and the wind carries that low, electric rumble, listeners swear they can hear it. A metallic resonance that feels older than weather itself. The engineers once wrote, "The storm is ready to fly." Perhaps it never stopped.